Team, proceed to gamersubs.gg objective and purchase delicious energy formula with a 10% saving quickly using code Thorin. That's Thorin. That's code Thorin. Do you register, team? Okay, good job, team. Now, also grab some AFK blend. AFK blend to help with the sleep later. No, not the linear sleep effect, Peanut, you idiot. Well done, squad. We've got all the gear. Well done. See you on game 2. Obviously, you can save 10% off all GamerSubs products using my code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersubs.gg. My favourite flavours would be lemonade and Sakura Splash for the energy formula. Maybe check out the grape flavour for the AFK blend to help with sleep. So, during Worlds this year, Kevin Kim, who is a journalist who actually works for Horizon Esports, which is Ashley Kang's site, actually revealed this information as a leak, which, as he said, during breakdown of mid-game situation between KT and T1s is in the final and discussing the decision-making involved behind taking Baron, Caster Jun, that super legendary caster who comes out at the beginning of LCK fans, that legendary guy who's the main caster in League for years and years and years for OGN, said, regarding this, in next year's LCK season, so it's the one coming up, the coach will be able to help with that a little bit, a change which you can look forward to. So already, that gets you interest, doesn't it? Then, actually, it was reported by Sheep Esports, and they put out basically a rumour about the same thing, and they had a bunch of potential things that could happen, but now it's basically been confirmed. So we've had this thing happen, coach comms. It says here introducing coach comms in the LCP, but it's also going to be in the LCK. So if you read here, it basically says that they're going to pilot it in the regular split of Season 1, but also like the LCK Cup thing. And then it explains that obviously in League, coaches aren't allowed after draft phase concludes to talk to the team, except after each game when they're doing a review. And that they think that limits the strategy adjustments you can make in real time. So the idea here is a limited way for coaches to interact with the team. So it says up to 3 times per game, with each activation only lasting a max of 45 seconds. You have to make a request, by the way, through these methods. You can then basically, with no pause, it's not a timeout, you can just talk to your team for 45 seconds. Now, to do this, you have to nominate one member of the coaching staff. They have to go and be restricted to only see their team's perspective, so they can't see the map with no fog of war like we see as the observer and as the fan at home. And the only comms they get are after the game from other people. And you can only switch the guy who does that coaching thing after each game. You can't have all your coaching staff there. Now, crucially, you don't have to do this. You can actually opt out and just have your coach as normal, sit in the back room, and you all watch, as you see, the on-stream version like we all see. And some teams, by the way, not only they may choose that, I think some teams will choose that depending on who their shot caller is, how well trained their team is. But you have to confirm before the game, and you can't just load into the game and go, hey, yeah, I actually want to go in the room. Too late then. You've seen a bunch of stuff. They're also going to obviously pay close attention to it to see if anything dodgy is being done or if it actually makes sense. They've got a bunch of explanations as to what's going on here. There's no pause. What can they see? You can only see what your team sees. All the opponent information is not going to be there. You can't communicate externally with the other people and the other coaches. If you're the opposing team, you don't get told, they're patching in Coach Kim now, like that. Well, he's actually the LPL now, but you get my point anyway. Will be speaking to the opposing team. You don't get to see that. It just happens. And basically, you go into a special booth or comms area, and the idea is you can only see that stuff there, and they don't let you leave. They don't let you leave. So you can't cheat. You can't go and give information away. And after you've used all your opportunities, then you may leave the designated area and presumably go back to your review room and do that because you're not going to interact with the players at that point. Obviously, I saw a lot of people, stupid people on Reddit, speculating this last part. Obviously, they will not be fucking playing the things you say to your team in terms of tactical things during the game. Are you out of your actual motherfucking mind? Oh, wait, we're talking about League fans. My bad. So there's so much we can get into and digest with this particular topic. Let's just start here. First of all, one of the reasons they're trialing it here is this presumably is an idea, it sounds to me, like actually Koreans wanted. Maybe Korean coaches got sick, like the coach Kim of Gen.G, of seeing their team have god-tier macro at MSI and LCK all throughout the year, and then at Worlds, people just shitting their pants and doing stupid things like fighting when they have a comp that shouldn't fight. Shout out Gatey Roster, Game 5 of the finals with a fucking non-full stack Smolder and a fucking, what's it called, a Yorick that wasn't split pushing. Or you could just look at Gen.G's games where they would just fight when it's like, you don't even need to fight on these ones. You can just pull back, you can give up that dragon while you're doing it, because they were just panicking, weren't they? The pressure got to them. The coach would have been able to say, right now, guys, we're just going to posture for this fight. And if we don't find an angle, we haven't found one, back off. We're just going to like sacrifice one guy, or we're going to keep the jungler up, or we're going to go for the Baron next. We're going to just like push out this wave over here, take it out. You could do all those concepts, couldn't you? Those rotations, those basic maps, split players, the cross maps, etc. You could do all that shit. You could tell them when to base. So the obvious implication here, though, is if it works out well, then we'll actually spread it to the rest of the world. So it's actually funny they're doing it at LCP, because historically, if you think about, like, it's actually a famous thing in the Anglosphere that they try out a lot of like security and sort of like, let's just say like dodgy things in terms of like intelligence agencies in actually New Zealand and Australia before they bring it to the UK and the USA. So it's almost that sort of a vibe. Also, think about how Fearless worked. If it goes awesome, they're going to want to spread this everywhere and everyone's going to want to have access to this. I also think an interesting thing here, because this is going to be piloted apparently, I think it was on Cheap Esports said this, during the LCK Cup, which starts in January. So not the Kesper Cup, the LCK Cup. That's basically the one that was won by Hanwha Life this year before that got them to first stand. And the LCP's split one, which begins the 16th of January. A key detail here is this. First things first, this is obviously going to change. This is why some teams might opt out. This, I think, will change how people review. I think the actual meta will become this. I don't think your main coach will be the one who does this. I think you will have one of your 3 or 4 people, maybe even a designated guy, whose job is he's really good at macro stuff, but he's just going to watch from there. But here's the reason why. Because if your coach that's the best at macro, the strategic coach, Koma in many cases in the past in T1, if he's the one in that booth watching, then when he comes out of that booth and goes, unless he can quickly review when he leaves after he's used it all, remember you might save one of your calls till the end of the game, how's he going to then go into the review room and handle the review? He didn't see all the game from the opponent's POV, whereas everyone who was just watching in the normal review room is going to have seen no fog of war, so they're going to have seen how the actual game unfolded. He's only going to see what his players saw. Now look, on one level you could say that'll help him understand more what happened in the game. Otherwise, he's in a situation where it's more like, why are they doing that? He's ganking, but maybe they didn't see that ward or some shit like that. So I also think the reason you might opt out is if you have an excellent shot call, or you just have great protocols, or you're just a team that's super clutch in those scenarios. The main concern I have as to why I don't like this is a very obvious one. I actually have said this literally for something like 8 or 9 years. I always said League of Legends, because one game is a single entity with no rounds or breaks. That's why pauses are so bad for the game and the integrity of the game. It's a single entity from the beginning of the game until the Nexus explodes, that you wouldn't want coaches to have timeouts or be able to talk to the players while they're playing. Because if you did so much of the macro and how the lanes interact and what the jungler does, and when people, all these things could then be somewhat made via the coach who has the godlike, I'm the StarCraft viewer perspective, although in this case he doesn't see the opponent stuff. But even so, he's not having to play and use his APM and comm things himself. He's just watching until he decides to comm whatever he chooses. So macro is an immediate area I have concerns. There are only 2 or 3 moments macro-wise in a game that decide a game and put a team on top to win a game. So I think this will remove a large part of the beauty of objective fights, of map movements, of catching people out, of 3-1-1ing, of having these scenarios where someone sidelanes for a while, and do you go get him now, or do you back off, or do you risk killing him? Can you afford for the jungler to leave when actually down they're good at posture near the dragon? Should you make a split map play, a cross map play? These are the questions that normally people have to figure out in the game, while laning, while playing the game, while jungling, while roaming on support, while coming back to lane, while zoning the other ADC off. That's one of the beauties of League of Legends. Like, imagine this. In the UFC and boxing, your coach can shout to you, right? But you're in the middle of having a fight at the time and you're getting hit by the guy. Imagine if you actually just had a headset on that wouldn't hurt your ears and he could just talk. So literally, he could constantly be like, watch out, he's about to go for the takedown. And you're like, ooh, just dodge that. It would somewhat ruin the fight. It wouldn't make the fight better. It would neutralize certain elements of what makes the fight brilliant, which is, yes, when you go to the head, you open up the body, etc., etc. We all know these concepts. When you get someone worried about the takedown, then you open up the boxing more and make them less likely to aggressively strike and to kick, for example, especially if you're a jiu-jitsu guy. So what key concept you have to understand here is something I learned from a mixture of StarCraft, Brood War, an incredibly intensive game which requires a massive amount of mental bandwidth at all times. Also, LS's conversations. And then finally, actually what the legendary Aptor, one of the best solo queue players ever, said about how Faker plays, which is he tries to exhaust the bandwidth of the other mid laner while like posturing the jungler's coming, calling the jungler, doing things that make it look like he's out of position, all these things to distract and draw the attention away so maybe a jungler can sneak in or they can get a 2-on-1, he can draw you into areas, or he can just fake and get fake pressure. So I think the key thing here is this: the bandwidth of a player who is playing, who is laning, who is rotating, who is communicating, who is anticipating a fight is going to happen when posturing. That is what makes the shot calls so hard. That is why you might sit at home and go, why are they fighting here? Like I just said about KT or about Gen.G. But it makes sense because in the moment, you are more focused, you are lasered in, you are in the moment, you are considering all these factors. Your bandwidth, you've only got so much you can think about and hold in mind at one time. You're not chilling, sitting, drinking a lovely drink going, I would do it like that. That's the reason why everyone who's a fan sounds like an idiot when they tell the greatest sports players of all time that they didn't know what they're doing. It's like in that moment, you wouldn't even have any chance to make a good decision. You'd be overwhelmed. So I also think this will change forever the roles of jungle and support, the main shot calling roles in League of Legends. Think of some great European examples. So one of the things Peter done on my show, the Best Damn League show, period, the LEC talk show I do on LFN, one of the things he discussed about Isma, who previously obviously played for SK Gaming, looked terrible, and then went to Giant X and sort of looked way better in the early game as a jungler, is he actually suspects someone like Giotto, his coach, or one of the analysts, just worked with him and basically just taught him, like, we're going to use this kind of a pathing early based on these lanes. Here's where I want you to go. Now, if you don't know, that's not even a new concept. The joke goes, the reason why people think Broxer was at one point very good, at least on screen, when he was in Fnatic, Season 8 going into Season 9, is because they think, again, that the coaching staff and some of the other laners even sort of helped Broxer design the pathing. So they just knew where to go and where to be, and then people were calling for him top lane to sit in a brush. Then maybe Caps was telling him, when I roam, follow me. And that made his life so much easier, and he could just use his hands, his mechanics, and all those Lee Sin kicks. But you put him in Team Liquid and CLG or whatever it was and other teams, he looked average as fuck. In fact, he looked at times below average. He looked lost. He didn't look like what he was doing. Consider that every team could have special input like that at a key moment in the game. Not the whole game. Admittedly, they're making it limited, but 3 times in a game. Another obvious one to me is this. You would use this sparingly, but if I'm about to have an objective soon, how about 5 seconds before we group for the objective, my coach tells one of my players, actually, I want you to base now. In the game, you're going to do like a cheetah recall now, or you're going to get this half item instead of waiting for the full item you want. Get this piece, get a ruby crystal, get a Doran's blade, whatever it is, or get a potion. And then you're going to come back and we're going to... Again, these are things that individual players make calls on, teams make calls on, and then collectively we have to all be on the same page as to what our style of players, what order of priority do we have, what protocols on when we lane and when we don't, when we group and when we don't, when we posture, when we give it up, when we go for it and go all in, when we go for the steal with the smack. What if there was someone who could just talk in a calm manner? Look, it would make higher level macro and there'd be, in that sense, better games. But I also think it would ruin a lot of the beauty of the great shot callers and the great thinkers and what makes League a very dynamic game and an exciting game in the moment when you're never sure what a player will do, if they'll have a weird brain fart, if they'll just forget what the options are, if they'll just pick the wrong thing, if they'll completely mess up. Isn't that kind of part of the thrill of League of Legends? I think it is. Then I think to myself, I already hated pauses. Every time there's a pause in a game, part of me puts an asterisk next to the result. Because no matter who wins, unless the game was almost over, that pause, even though in the pauses you can't talk and your coach can't talk, Yeah, but it allows you to think about what's happened so far. You can think about how your lane's going. You can think about how those team fights are going. You can think about what comp are they playing and how should that really function. And what's the best way to both avoid the worst things they're doing, aversion thinking, and what's the best way to get to my ideals, win conditions, as to how I win. And who could I help here? And should I keep doing this or should I sack it? You can think all these things when there's a 10-minute pause. You can't think that stuff live in the game. The game is happening to you. The game is happening to you. You don't have the chance to do that. It changes your info and your considerations. Then I also think the downside is this, because by the way, it's something like this happened in Counter-Strike, which I'll get to. It means that when you have a great shot caller and thinker in the game who can come, they are so OP, as history of League of Legends shows, that will be degraded. Some of that will be evened up or even superseded by coach calls. So for example, back in the day, if you had Matter in Samsung or RNG, a little bit of the KT Super Team, not in T1 certainly, that was an unbelievable player to have. He basically invented how to like split the fucking map and play on the jungle with the jungler and set up the skirmishes. How about Score? Used to be an ADC, people forget that. He used to be an ADC and he became one of the craziest brain junglers ever who could take literally like a squad that should come fourth in the LCK and have them battling T1 to 5 games, if not going to the finals or third place game. How about someone like Doinby? By the way, Doinby's just retired. Wouldn't you just take Doinby as a coach at this point in time? The guy used to type timers while fucking laning really well and then be unbelievable in team fights. Then you think of some of the other players. Peanut just retired. Wouldn't you get him as a coach? Perk's just retired. He's a fabulous macro player. Mako's still active. Well, what's the point of me having Mako on a team, by the way, if he's just going to be a little bit subpar like he was sometimes this year and the shot caller doesn't matter? He was one of the linchpin players in EDG that made them a great team for many, 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 many years and have pretty good macro for an LPL team. So suddenly the significance of having an active player like Faker, Doinby, Mako, Peanut, Lehens, suddenly it's not as significant. Now, people have speculated, I think this might even be true. Since Faker is so famous for making calls like this, maybe this is the way that when Faker stops playing, he just steps in the coach booth and he's this coach and he just gets to tell Scout, BDD, fucking Chovy, whoever the mid laner is at that time, he gets to tell that guy, now go and group here, now do this. Because you notice there's not that many of the mid laners are the great shot callers, Doinby, etc. A lot of them are the junglers and supports. I actually think one thing this will immediately do, by the way, everyone's looking at LCK. If this spreads to the LPL, I think this is what will help the LPL win Worlds. If you have a Tabe, a really smart coach, they've had some fabulous ones there. Could you imagine if they could actually talk and tell Top Esports not to take this fight? Or to go all in on the fight? Instead of just letting them just freak out when it's a match against T1 and just let them turn their brains off. If you think that some of those teams like that JDG Super Team, how would they ever have lost if they've had someone to help them like call some of the fights and when to reposition? The problem I have goes like this. We actually had something like this in CS. In CS, you used to actually, until it was like 2/3 of the way into 2016, you used to be able to, at one point, literally talk the whole time as a coach. You stood behind the team. So you could basically be the shot caller. Obviously, we call that title in-game leader in CS, but it doesn't make sense because you're not in-game. You're watching the game and then shot calling from outside of the game. So basically, some teams, famously Na'Vi, where they had a guy called Starix as their outside of the game leader, but not a player, he used to be one of the best shot callers in the world, but from the coaching booth. Now, the problem with that was, yes, it made the macro incredibly high level for some of these teams, and some of the lesser teams actually allowed them to get in the game without a great in-game leader. But one, it did reduce the value of the godlike in-game leaders like Carrigan and Glaive, etc. And also, for me, the games are just too different. CS is like American football. The downs are basically the rounds, aren't they? You have the offense and the defense. You have these natural breaks where you want someone to reset the strategy, and it's adaptation between those that tends to be the mastery of being a coach. Now, I liked that all the time, but they limited it for similar reasons. The problem I have is this. League of Legends, I always said timeouts would ruin this game. If a coach could really tell you, now go to the Baron, it spoils something in the game. Quick, do a base race, you can get there in time, and then the other guy doesn't have the coaching guy in the booth. Doesn't that somewhat ruin the game? So my issue is this. In League of Legends, you never know what scenarios are going to happen in a game, even after you've done the draft. Even if you practice with that comp, because you might not practice against the exact comp of the opponent, they might not play it out the exact same way. The circumstances are always different in a game of League of Legends. They're never exactly precise to how you practiced and visualized and conceived them. So, in League of Legends, you're not coaching adaptations. What you're coaching, you can adapt between games, obviously. You're coaching the principles and protocols of how you want them to play and the style you want them to play with their star players, their supportive elements, and what draft has come through. That's what you're coaching. So essentially, a lot of that will actually be undercut by being able to actually go, actually do this thing, or to coach someone through a Baron take, backing off a dragon, giving up the one that doesn't matter, split cross mapping, doing a base race. Some of these things will lose some of their appeal. One of the reasons base races work, by the way, is the players don't always notice. They're not watching the minimap always. They're busy trying to hit the base themselves. So many times, quick, get his recall. He's trying to recall back. The players have to notice that. If they miss it, they're fucked. If the guy starts teleporting in time, he gets out. Think of all these brilliant moments in League that you cherish that make for the thrill of the game. You're going to put the game a little bit on rails for me. Now, true, this won't affect every game and every team, and every coach doesn't have someone who can necessarily do this, by the way, right now, who'd be excellent. It'll take a while to adapt to it. And maybe they just use it for this one cop and one split, and that's it. They put it back on the shelf. I don't hate the idea you're trying to think outside their box. I just don't think this adds to League of Legends and makes it better. Like, I actually think if this meant T1 now lose because someone can match Faker with an out-of-the-game brain, that's not as cool. That would be like when Magnus Carlsen was absolutely the best chess player. If you'd have just allowed his opponents to have like Gary Kasparov in their ear going, actually, watch out, I think he's trying to bait you into this thing here. I know that's like 10 moves deep, but I can think on his level. Or even worse, God forbid you actually did have an AI or some sort of deep blue just helping you in the game in that regard. That'd be cheating, obviously. But again, who knows how these things would be implemented. So I personally think it's actually a somewhat bad move. I'm not a fan of it. I would rather stay with how the game currently is, especially because I do revere and very much admire great shot callers and thinkers who can do it while playing the game.
Hey guys, Keijo here, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel. I may never have found my way to playoffs, but I'm pretty sure Thorin's never found the clit. So yeah, enjoy the video.
Now, you know you never catch me dolo online because I'm rolling deep and we dem boys. Who am I talking about? The JerCkysMiNi0n. So this video and the content on my channel is kindly supported by Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Thooorin, Jensen Goh, Nicky, Jasun. You know who my second in command is, JerCkysMiNi0n. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Would you like to ask me a question in an AMA? Do you want to take part in one of those lengthy discussions where you get to set the topic? Maybe you want to see who upcoming guests are in my interviews and on my talk shows. Well, all of these perks and more are available to you if you put your money where your mouth is and join the JerCkysMiNi0n today. How? Via the Patreon link in the description box below. You dig?